Okay, hello class. Good to see you today. Welcome on this rainy, cool Monday. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. We're definitely experiencing a changing of the seasons. I have a maple tree in my backyard. It's starting to show out right now with red, lots of red. So it's a beautiful tree. Any rate, we are here beginning, I believe, week 11. Okay, so we mark time pretty well in this class, it seems to me, because we're kind of doing a chapter a week. However, we're in chapter 11. We started last week, and we'll not do chapter 12. At least it's certainly not going to be on your test coming up this week. Wait a minute. Would this be the 11th week or 12th week? Maybe I'm off a little bit there. We're in chapter 11, but we skipped a chapter. Okay, that's it. Yeah, remember? So your exam, picks up with chapter 6, and there was one of those chapters we skipped, like chapter 8 or something, or 9. But we're in chapter 11, so we've covered 10 chapters in 11 weeks. And so that's okay, that's good, and y'all seem to be keeping up with the homework pretty well. Not everybody in this class, but I think you guys are. So at any rate, we'll talk more about the exam, specifically next time we meet, okay? We'll catch your breath. I want to continue plowing through this chapter on monopoly, chapter 11. That we introduced last week. This is basically, I think, the third session in which we've talked about monopoly, and it's a very important concept. We're learning some fundamental concepts here in this chapter, in the previous chapter where we addressed perfect competition, which are kind of poles, if you will, or extremes of this continuum dealing with market structure. So, you have couple of other places along that continuum this book addresses between perfect competition and monopoly. I think we all already intuitively understand aspects of that. We know when there's competition, we know when there's monopoly, and so forth. But at any rate, there's a couple other positions, there are a couple other market structures that are intermediate. We'll give those some attention as well in the subsequent two chapters. There's one dealing with oligopoly and another with monopolistic competition. So we will be looking at those. But especially with this chapter, the theory you're learning in this chapter is actually fundamental to the other market structures. Not so much perfect competition, we've dealt with that, kind of beat that in the wall. But this stuff of a downward sloping market or individual demand curve. For a monopolist, the individual demand curve is the market demand curve, so it's downward sloping. The implications that flow from that, most importantly, that marginal revenue is always less than price. It kind of steers the firm and that market structure to a particular behavior, and that is typical in the other market structures, okay? So it's important that we kind of understand what's going on with monopolies to get a better feel for what's going on when we get to oligopolies and monopolistic competition. Okay, so that's kind of a preview of coming attractions, if you will. Now let's go to the document camera here. I just want to review a couple things here. This is a diagram from your text. What you see here is really a long run equilibrium here for a monopolist. Monopolists have barriers to entry. You don't have that in perfect competition. Perfect competition, this green area would not exist in the long run. This green area being economic profit, okay, which is the lure for other capitalists to enter this industry, other owners of capital to enter. Will not exist in perfect competition, gets competed away, okay, but you got the lure here in monopoly, but you don't have the opportunity for other firms to enter because, alas, with a monopoly, there's only one firm, the incumbent firm, that has either a patent or a license or has taken advantage of economies of scale. Okay, we've talked about that too, where you have a long run average total cost curve, and perhaps for this firm, They may have taken advantage of a first mover advantage and moved down that long run average total cost curve. When you have significant economies of scale, that can happen. And so that, just by virtue of the fact that there's an inherent advantage to the first mover, this profit here is going to be sustained. In all those cases, they'll be sustained, but certainly even for natural monopolies, there's no law that says you can't go into competition with Walmart. I keep talking about Walmart. Almost a monopoly in big box retail. There's no law that says you can't do it, okay? It's not like they have a license that makes them the only game in town, but good luck, all right? Good luck covering all the big, large upfront fixed costs, building distribution centers and so forth to compete in that space. You're not likely to be able to do that. So that's a barrier to entry, okay? There's natural barriers to entry with natural monopolies like big box retail, commercial aircraft manufacturing, public utilities and so forth. But then there are more artificial barriers to entry, like with patents, license, and so forth. So those barriers to entry will make sure that that profit remains for the incumbent firm. So this is the case, a typical case for a monopolist here, enjoying an economic profit. I hope by now you've had a chance to look at some of those review problems that I put up in Chapter 11. You're going to see a number of diagrams like this. I guess I give you plenty of practice there, but they ask you on the diagrams to identify various things like what area, what rectangle is profit, what rectangle is total cost, what rectangle is total revenue, and so forth. So, your relevant curves here are the average total cost curve and your demand curve. So, basically, to sketch something like this, a curve like this, you want to go through this process they outline for you at the top of page 233. The first thing they say is determine where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that's what we do here in this diagram. We see that this is a typical marginal cost, marginal revenue curve. So they intersect here. The next thing they say here is that determine the profit maximizing price by extending a vertical line upward from that output. So the output in this case here is 5 units. That's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Remember, that's the profit maximizing principle you want to apply in every market structure. Now, in perfect competition, we can refine that, right? We can say, look for the quantity where price equals marginal cost, because price and marginal revenue are the same thing for the individual supplier in perfect competition. But again, I keep mentioning this. To me, many years ago, my dear wife, she was a teacher in high school. She says, repeat, repeat, repeat. I remember her saying that. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm repeating something here that hopefully will be indelibly etched in our mind, is that the monopolist faces a downward sloping demand curve. That's the individual and the market demand curve, because they're the only supplier. And consequently, the marginal revenue is below the demand curve, in which case here, you look for the price way up here, which will be above marginal cost and marginal revenue. So you equate marginal revenue and marginal cost first, and then you look for that price by going all the way up to the demand curve here. And then we can determine the profit by drawing this rectangle that has a corner here on the average total cost curve. So price minus average total cost for the number of units sold. In this case, 5 units will give you economic profit. So they put some numbers in here. I hope that makes sense. So this is economic profit. This is total cost here, right? From the average total cost to 0 here. That's the average cost per unit for 5 units. So you'd multiply, it looks like that's 94 here. 94 times 5. What is that, 400 and something. It would be the total cost. And so you should be able to find total revenue, economic profit, and total cost. And so that's what they're telling you to do here in step 3 as far as determining the economic profit. They mentioned these 2 methods here. Ultimately, whether you find the total revenue and subtract the cost, or that's one of the methods, or you just go for this directly, it's the area of that green rectangle that is the economic profit. I have a handout here. I meant to give you guys this, and I guess I'll go ahead and give you this, kind of a picture of this. And we'll come to this in just a minute. Okay, all right. I got a couple of handouts for you today if we get to everything. All right, Glenn. I'm going to leave these back here in case somebody shows up. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. You'll see this picture here on that, the thing I just gave you here. Now, I will say that there's no guarantee here that a monopolist will enjoy a profit. Okay, they may experience a loss. And there's a picture of this on page 234. Page 234, you still equate marginal revenue and marginal cost. But notice what's different here. The difference is ATC curve is way up here. It's above the demand curve. So the total cost exceeds total revenue, so you're going to have a loss here. So the position of the cost curves is the cost side of the market, the supply side, if you will. It's completely independent of the demand side of the market, which is reflected by the position of the demand and its accompanying marginal revenue curve. Now, that thing I just gave you, a couple things it establishes here. It'll establish again that for a downward sloping demand curve, the marginal revenue curve is twice as steep. It's twice as steep, has the same intercept, vertical intercept, but it's twice as steep as the demand curve. We derived that last time. I'm going to come back to that here in just a second. The other thing that flows from this, okay, is the behavior of the total revenue for various levels of output. There's this diagram in your text on page 230. Let me see if I can get this on a little better deal. Yeah, here we go. It's on this page here. All right. So a couple things here. I want you to make sure you understand what's going on in this diagram here. We're going for understanding, right? I'm not big on memorizing things. My hope is that you build your intuition in this course with some of these relationships. You look at the world as a microeconomist would. So this is the relevant demand curve. It's the only demand curve for a monopolist, okay? They're the only game in town. And we'll see this with the other two market structures. Firm facing an downward sloping demand curve will have a marginal revenue beneath that. Now, what we see here is for a monopolist, this curve is twice as steep. It has the same vertical intercept, but it's twice as steep. Okay, that's just something you want to keep in mind here. Now, why is that? Okay, why is it twice as steep? We did this idea, these diagrams with these rectangles here. And for a high price, remember, when the monopolist wants to increase another unit of output to sell in the market, it's got to lower its price. When the price is high, the gain exceeds the loss. Okay, we drew those rectangles. Hopefully, I don't need to go back and do that today. So the gain exceeds the loss here when you morph the total rectangle for a high price to the total rectangle for a lower price. But when you're down at lower prices, the red area is greater than the blue area, right? So that when a monopolist lowers their price to sell one more unit, so you're computing now marginal revenue, it would have to be negative because the loss exceeds the gain, okay? They probably have a picture of this. I don't know if they have a picture of this in your book, but we drew one, okay? I don't see it in your text, but we drew that. We went through that. So go back and look at that. You remember I said, well, it should make sense that somewhere, and we'll see this on this diagrams too as well, somewhere along the midpoint here of the demand curve, that if the monopolist lowers their price, lowers the price to pick up one more unit to sell one more unit, kind of in this region here, the gain equals the loss. So the net change in total revenue is zero. The total revenue is not going to change in value. Okay, does everybody follow me there? Remember when we did this little, I just mention this real quick with a little bitty diagram. But when you're kind of in the middle here of the demand curve, then the gain and the loss are about the same. So the net gain, okay, is going to be equal to, on this unit here, it's going to be equal to 0. It's the gain minus the loss, which is about 0. Okay, the point here is that when you find marginal revenue, which is the change in total revenue, the change in the rectangle size, divided by the change in quantity, and if you're just going from one unit here, you know, maybe this is, I'll use the ones in your book, the units here in your book, maybe this is 8 and this is 9, I don't know, doesn't matter what it is. The marginal revenue on that 9th unit is going to be close to 0 because the change in total revenue is equal to 0. So this is 0. So that's to say that the marginal revenue for quantities halfway between here and here, marginal revenue is going to be 0. For quantities greater than that value associated with the midpoint quantity here, marginal revenue is going to be negative. So that's what you're seeing here in this this diagram here, hopefully. This is twice as steep as this. The idea is if I went up here, this would be the midpoint. I guess I could have maybe done a little better job in tracing this out. But I think you got the idea. This curve really extends on down. The marginal revenue continues to extend on down. So the marginal revenue can be negative. It would be negative down here. It's positive up here. And so you want to keep that in mind. That's going to be the case for monopolists. And we'll come back to these cost curves in a minute. So ignore those for a minute. I'm just talking about the demand side. The demand and the marginal revenue curves are going to look like this for a monopolist. And so, okay, just focusing on those two curves a second, we saw last time as well that at this value here, I'm going to draw a vertical line. It's over there just a little bit. But at this value of Q, total revenue would be maximum. Total revenue now is what I have on the vertical axis, not price like I have up here, price and marginal revenue, okay, which is given by the demand and marginal revenue curving respectively. But now I'm plotting total revenue as a function of quantity. Total revenue as a function of quantity is maximized here at the midpoint Q. So their picture in their book, in our book, is a little more exact than this, but we'll be drawing on that here in a minute. Hope you see that and hope you see why. Because again, remember the total revenue rectangle are these rectangles that we're inscribing within the demand curve. And those rectangles have the biggest area when you're here at the midpoint on the demand curve. If you draw a tall, skinny rectangle, it's not going to have much area, not much revenue at a high price because you don't sell very many units up here. At a low price, you might sell a lot of units, but you're not, drawing much revenue on each one. So in this region right here, those rectangles, those total revenue rectangles have the largest value. So that's what's being conveyed by this picture right here. The other thing I want you to see here is that now if you look at the total revenue curve, it's a parabola. Again, for high price, you sell few quantities. You'd be over here at these values of Q. Okay, the rectangle, it's diminishing in area. Total revenue is going to be close to 0. When you raise that price high enough, it will become 0. So you have this point here that corresponds to a very high price where you sell very few units. Okay, and then you lower the price to sell more units. So if we sell more units, we go from left to right. Those rectangles get bigger, then they get smaller again. So that's why you have this parabolic shape, if you will. Okay. Now, does that make sense? That the marginal revenue for a monopolist here, ideally with a linear demand curve, is going to have a parabolic total revenue curve. Hope you see that, okay? Hope that makes sense given these rectangles, revenue rectangles that we're drawing. The other thing, one more thing I want to mention about this, just focusing again on the demand side of the market here, is that recall when we did marginal cost for that chapter where we were looking at cost of production, the marginal cost gave us the slope of the total cost curve. Y'all remember that? Just real quick, jog your memory, but we sketched a total cost curve. Maybe it looks like this. Remember that? Oops, that's a total cost curve. Okay. Dollars. Remember us going through this process where we took the slope of this, and then we sketched the slope of that curve in another curve. And what was the curve that gave us the slope of the total cost curve? Does anyone know? For extra, the slope of the total cost is the marginal cost, okay? So remember, marginal cost, so that's the slope. So this has a steep slope here. It kind of gets shallow and gets steep again. So that's why a marginal cost curve is a U-shaped curve. So if you find the slope of the total cost curve, you get the marginal cost curve. Marginal anything gives you the slope of the original curve. Gives you the slope, okay? So that's why we went through this thing. We talked about total cost. We looked at the total variable cost curve too, which is just take the fixed cost out. And you get a curve here that tells you the slope of each of these, and it's going to intersect the minimum of the average total cost and average variable cost curves. But the point here I'm trying to make, though, is the marginal gives you the slope of the total. The same is true here, okay? This is a profound insight. If you get this, it's really neat. Okay, the marginal gives you the slope of the total, always. Whether you're talking cost or whether you're talking revenue. Notice for the total revenue curve, I just got my ruler here, but notice for low values of Q, it's a steep curve, right? High slope. But what's happening to the slope of the total revenue curve as we increase quantity of output that corresponds to a lower price? So you lower the price, you sell more units. Okay, if you lower the price, you sell more units. What's happening to the marginal revenue? Can you tell? Or the slope of the total revenue curve? It's going down, right? Here's the total revenue steep. It becomes zero here. And then guess what? These have negative slopes. You're getting more and more negative. So that's why the marginal revenue curve looks like this, because the marginal revenue curve is giving you, for its y value of each point on the curve, the y value is telling you the slope of the total revenue curve. Okay? So, I mean, here it looks like the first unit, the slope of the total revenue is $150 per unit. So that would be right here. If you found the slope of this curve, it's pretty high. But notice it's decreasing. The marginal revenue curve gives the slope of the total revenue curve. Because for a monopolist here, the total revenue is a parabola, concave down. The slope is continuously decreasing, so the marginal revenue curve is a downward sloping. And it becomes zero here, where this curve is a maximum. Okay, very important, very, very important concept in microeconomic theory. You maximize a total by looking where the marginal is equal to zero, okay? I could write that to the right here. Just TR is max, okay, is maximized at a value of Q where the marginal revenue is equal to zero, okay? So if your goal is to maximize total revenue, okay, well, it might be, but typically your book, I mean, there's a lot of times we might want to do that. Really what you want to maximize is profit, but the same principle applies, okay. Profit is also a parabolic function a lot of times, but at any rate, if you want to maximize total revenue, then set the marginal revenue equal to zero. Okay, this is just a principle. This is called a first order condition. I'll just say this here. You may not care much about that, but it's called a first order condition in microeconomic theory. If you want to maximize anything, okay, you look for where the marginal is equal to zero. So if you want to maximize total cost, look for where the marginal cost is equal to zero. At least that gives you a candidate, okay? All right. Has anyone here, by any chance, had any differential calculus? I don't mean to shake us up. Okay, in calculus, you learn how to get the marginal from the total for like polynomial functions. That's like the first thing you learn. I just want to mention this a second. Is this would be a second degree function. You know from algebra, parabolas are second degree. They have a quadratic term. They have a negative x squared term here, some coefficient in front of it. If you take the derivative of that, you'll get a linear function. It looks like this. And just mention this for the benefit of those who've had basic calculus, just basic, is that we can obtain this marginal revenue by differentiating the total with respect to this variable here, Q. You always have to have a variable you differentiate with respect to. So here it's not X, it's Q. So at any rate, that sets up for you what's called the first order condition. Okay, all right, and that's a very practical problem, okay? Now, again, typically what we want to do in a capitalistic society is we want to maximize profit. I hope you want to maximize profit, right? And I'll guarantee you your boss will want you to, okay? If you're working out in the world, they're not interested in hiring people, potential employers who will not assist in the effort of maximizing profit. There's a lot we could say about that, but we'll leave it there. Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a review there. So you should be able to produce total revenue curve. You should know the relationship between total revenue and marginal revenue. You should see how the marginal revenue gives the slope of the total revenue curve. All right. I got some notes to myself. I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, we've done that. Okay, so, all right, so I gave you this just a moment ago as a handout. Want to drive home one more point here is that, you know, you have the same theory for cost curves for an individual and perfect competition. The only difference was on the demand side, this curve was not downward sloping, right? It was horizontal. Remember that? And so generally, you know, if I overlaid this, just to make sure we can connect these theories, okay? I'm going to get a sheet of paper here, and I'm going to just cheat here just a little bit because I can see through my paper, but I think you got I want you to get the idea here just to make sure we understand. This is maybe low tech, but I think it's effective. ATC and marginal cost is here. This is price, and this is quantity. Okay, so now this goes through the minimum of the ATC. I guess it looks kind of like it's here, but the idea it goes through the minimum, I think we remember. So I drew part of this picture. This is a monopolist, okay? Perfect competition, it's different, right? Remember, perfect competition faces not a downward sloping demand curve, right? They face a horizontal demand curve, okay? So you just alter the picture that way. And that's determined by what's going on in the market. So this is the marginal revenue or individual demand curve, which also gives you the price. So we went through this. This is perfect competition. We're being PC here, right? Perfect competition. What's going on here is that in the market, and I'll just do this to the side. Again, we talked about this. I guess I'm being a little redundant. But remember, this price is set in the market. Okay? So this is the market, MKT. This is the individual. So I'm being a little pedantic here, but I want to make sure we've got the difference between these two. So the individual supplier in perfect competition will also equate marginal revenue and marginal cost. You always do that. And you're at this point right here. Now that would be, okay, back here, that would be this point right here if this curve, the demand curve, facing the monopolist were like this, okay? And we are able to extol the virtues of perfect competition with a simple diagram, which I think is really neat in economics. We can say, well, we need competition, free markets, and so forth. What's neat is you can quantify efficiencies and so forth here, but we notice here in perfect competition that, you know, price equals marginal cost. And so you had something called allocative efficiency. You also have productive efficiency because in the long run, the price will be at minimum average total cost. So, but at any rate, I don't want to put that diagram in here because this has got a slide and so forth. A profit here is going to be competed away. So you have these curves change. But at any rate, you certainly see here, you have allocative efficiencies here in perfect competition because price is going to equal marginal cost. This is the price here. Set in the market equals marginal cost. All right. But here, all we can say is marginal revenue equals marginal cost, but not price equals marginal cost for the monopolist, because price is way up here on the demand curve. Marginal revenue and marginal cost intersect down here. So you see price is greater than marginal cost. Price is greater than marginal cost. Okay? Now that's, from society's point of view, not a good thing. That means the last unit sold is sold at a price that it costs to make it. In other words, someone values that pill that'll cure cancer. Someone values at a price much greater, perhaps, but at least somewhat greater than the marginal cost of producing it. Now, when we talk about marginal cost again, we're considering the cost of the additional unit. You realize, like with pharmaceuticals, you might spend billions of dollars developing a drug, but once you got the drug developed, the cost of making one more pill is like a penny, okay? And that's the marginal cost. And so if you think about it a second, there's almost kind of a perverse, I mean, it might seem like it's a perverse outcome here when you have a monopolist here, is that, you know, they charge and they will want to charge. Why? Because they're a profit maximizing agent. They'll equate marginal revenue and marginal cost. They'll charge up here. That's rational behavior for monopolists. But that will be higher than the price associated with this social optimum. You know, we had a social optimum here where price equals marginal cost, okay? But not so here. I'm probably beating this in the wall. This is where perfect competition would drive things. But for a monopolist, the price is higher than marginal cost, can be much higher, and certainly is with pharmaceuticals. So I remember 30 years ago, I thought I was going to die. And they just come out with these proton pump inhibitors. It's like Nexium and I can't think of some of the others. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe I had kind of a stressful job or something. I was popping Rolaids like they were going out of style, and it wouldn't touch the stomach acid. And so doctor said, hey, we got this new thing. It's a proton pump inhibitor. It turns off the acid-producing pumps in your stomach. Just turns them off. It doesn't neutralize the acid. It turns off the acid pumps. So I go, okay, I'll try that. And sure enough, man, it worked. And I take one a day. Now I take one a month. It's really great. But the point is, there were billions of dollars. That used to be, and now it's over the counter, but now you had to have a prescription on that. But the price was, it was pricey back in the day, okay? But I'd paid the price because I wanted to live, all right? But the point is, the cost of making Brian Jackson and another Nexium every day or every other day was a penny to the company. The marginal cost is way down here, really. The price far exceeded the marginal cost. This is typical for pharmaceuticals and other patent holders out there. They have monopoly power. And as society, we may be chagrined by that a little bit, right? We say, hey, you should produce more of those drugs, okay? We should have more pills out here, so we should have Q here for perfect competition. I'll just put Q star in here for perfect competition. In perfect competition, you'd have more units produced at a what? Lower price, okay? But if we let the monopolist develop the drug and then maximize profits, you're going to be here. And this is what we do in pharmaceuticals in the United States and so forth. And we let monopolists charge a profit-maximizing price. Why would we do that? Okay, because obviously society's better off here. Just looking at the static picture, society's better off at a lower price. You know, cheaper pills, more pills. But alas, this again creates a profit. You'll see the profit here is the difference between the price they charge and the average total cost. We had this a while ago, but this rectangle here is a profit that will be sustained in the long run, and we allow for that. We allow for pharmaceutical companies to charge a high price, earning not just a profit. Okay, you say, what's wrong with the profit? I'm not talking about an accounting profit. I'm talking about an economic profit, which, remember, is telling you you're a lot better off here than you are in your second best alternative. You got investors here that they're cleaning up here. I mean, so it's a big deal to earn an economic profit. We allow that because this is the reward for doing the hard work, all the research and so forth, in developing that patent. So the patent becomes a barrier to entry. Somebody else can't make Nexium for 20 years because you got the patent or whatever it is. It's a barrier to entry, but that's the reward to incentivize innovation, research and development, and so forth. So that barrier to entry we allow to exist in our society, if you will, because it's the incentive for innovation. Again, this is a lure here for other firms to enter, but they have to wait till the patent expires and then they can invade and produce generic drugs, okay? That's the idea. So that's why we allow for that. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this diagram. Society wants to be here. The individual monopolist wants to be here. There's profit we can gather here. But there's one other thing. My diagram's going to get a little crowded here. But in perfect competition, this triangle here, where I got 3 big dots here, this triangle here would be consumer surplus. This would be consumer surplus, the area below the demand curve and above the market price. Remember, it's consumer surplus. This is like the, if you will, kind of the profit that accrues to the supply, to the demand side of the market. We again, real quickly, but you've experienced the consumer surplus if you find an item that you buy at a cheaper price than you're willing to pay. This is what people are willing to pay. This is what they have to pay. That's good, okay? Notice what happens, though. Consumer surplus is diminished for monopolists. Consumer surplus, CS, consumer surplus, is going to go down when we allow for monopoly pricing. And producer surplus is likely to increase. All right, I'm going to say producer surplus will probably, not definitely, but I'm going to put a question mark here, probably. Why did I say that? Because the producer surplus, recall, is the area below the price, the market price, and above the marginal cost curve. So notice how this region here, kind of a triangle here, notice how it morphs when we go to monopoly. It gets taller. Well, that's good for the monopolist, but then they sell fewer units. So it becomes a trapezoid, okay? The triangle here, I hope you see it here, this triangle here, in perfect competition is producer surplus. Under monopoly, morphs into this trapezoid. The trapezoid is usually bigger than the triangle, but not always. So the monopolist gives up this area, okay, to gain this area. Okay, so it's not unambiguous in every case that the producer will be better off, and that they'll enjoy a higher producer surplus, aka kind of this is close to profit. Okay, but the idea is the profit's going to go up. Producer surplus will most likely increase, but consumer surplus will definitely decrease. Okay, will definitely decrease. So consumers are like worse off. Now, so the ideal situation would be this. Okay, and so you may ask, why doesn't it work this way? The ideal situation would be that Nexium would be bought and sold this quantity and this price. But alas, the producer of Nexium is not going to do that. Okay? If everybody, I mean, wouldn't it be a beautiful world, I guess, if people say, I just want to cure cancer. I don't care about getting rich. And there are people like that, okay? There are people like that, and I think that's wonderful, that devote themselves to an enterprise because it helps elevate the state of humankind. But generally speaking, the people who put money into these efforts, the owners of capital, are looking for a return, a financial return. Okay, so I wanted to mention those things. I thought on the heels of that, I've put up some problems, put up 3 problems for y'all to look at. I thought we'd work one of these. They're very identical, but we're going to use that theory here to solve some real world problems, okay, where you have real numbers, okay? So let me distribute these here. The sniffles today. 3 here. So we just lost hers. There you go, Glenn. I have I put these online, okay? So you can print these. They're online. I just went ahead and made you a copy. I have not put solutions yet, and may not. I'm not sure. My hope here is that you will work these, see if you can work these as we're going to do the first one at least here, and I think it's a good exercise for you. I think this text, I like this text. We switched to this text from another this semester because there's some features about this, remember, McConnell and Brew that we didn't have in the previous book. But I think they give you short shrift. They do short shrift in this chapter on some real world problems in monopoly theory. So I wanted to look at this, some market theory problems in monopoly. So that's what we're going to have here. So we're going to go to the DocCam, and let's see if we can at least work one of these. I think you'll see the other 2 are very similar. Okay, so I borrowed this somewhere. Just saying, it's fair use. I don't do this very often, but to supplement our approach here, it talks about Henry Potter, okay? Owns the only well in town that produces clean drinking water. Boy, that's a monopoly, isn't it? Faces falling demand, marginal revenue, and marginal cost curves. So here's the demand curve. I wrote inverse demand. Technically speaking, when you express P in terms of Q, it's called the inverse demand. That's, it's up to you. If you express Q equals 70 minus P, that's called the demand curve. Because remember, the independent variable in economics is, well, it's P, but that puts the independent variable on the vertical axis. All right. But at any rate, whatever you call it, the marginal revenue is 70 minus 2Q. And I want to stop there for a minute. And I want us to just think about that relationship. And I'm just going to rough this out. It doesn't have to be real pretty. Get the idea across. Price and cost on the vertical axis. Remember, demand is P equals 70 minus Q. This would be like Y equals 70 minus X. You've sketched that before in your algebra courses, right? Know how to do that. You thought you never had to use algebra, but then you took microecon, right? So Y equals mx plus b form. This is the vertical intercept. So it has vertical intercept at 70. This is just P equals 70 minus Q. So it has a vertical intercept of 70, and actually this is a very simple function. It has a horizontal intercept here. But remember, Y equals mx plus b is here. So there is the demand curve. Demand curve, it intersects these 2 points. So if X is 70, or Q is 70, P is 0. If P is 70, Q is 0. One way to always sketch these functions, like this one here, P and Q, is just put a 0 in for each variable and solve for the other. And you'll have the 2 points where it intersects. So P is 0, Q's got to be 70. And in this case, if Q is 0, P's got to be 70. So there's the demand curve. That's this thing right here. Notice the revenue, marginal revenue curve What's the difference in these two? Do they have the same vertical intercept? Yep, okay. Both go through, I hope that clears up here. Both goes through 70, goes through this point, but this one has twice the slope, right? So that's what we've been talking about. So it goes through 35 here, so it goes like boom. This is marginal revenue, okay? So it goes through the point 35. There's your marginal revenue curve. All right, if I can. Now, let's skip down here. Marginal cost curve is 10 plus Q. Okay, so this will have a positive slope. It's like y equals 10 plus x. It'll have a positive slope and a positive vertical intercept at 10. So it's a curve that looks like this. Okay, it's a straight line. Mine's kind of a wiggly line there, but marginal cost is 10 plus Q. So this is 10 plus Q, and marginal revenue, again, is 70 minus 2Q, and the demand is given there. Okay? Demand is price equals 70 minus Q. So the demand curve gives you the price and so forth. Well, I ask you some questions here. First thing I want us to make sure we understand before we answer any of these questions is, can you draw the situation? Okay? I would expect you to be able to do this much. It's just basic algebra, okay? Just basic stuff. These are all linear functions. And so I would expect you to be able to do this, and this is kind of the approach you'll take on the other problems as well. But obviously you can kind of anticipate where they're going to go here. They're going to want you to describe this monopolist by, here you go, we graphed the three firms, but now they want to maximize profit. Wouldn't you know, it's a greedy capitalist, right? Oh, dirty capitalist, you know. I hate to say, I'm being facetious, but they talk about capitalist pigs and all that in some areas of the world. So, you know, if you like profit, I guess that's what you could be charged with. But at any rate, Mr. Potter is one of those capitalists who wants to maximize profit. At what quantity does he produce? Now, is that a real world question? You bet it is, right? Okay. What quantity does he produce? You've done your market theory and so forth, and you have this demand curve. Okay, people do this stuff all the time. They look at cost data to come up with the marginal cost curve. They do some market study to come up with the demand curve. So they do this sort of thing all the time. But so it's a real world question too. What quantity does he produce, and at what price does he charge to sell that quantity? Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So what are we going to do first, class, to answer that question? What would you do at any market structure to find the profit maximizing quantity? To find Q star, okay, the quantity at which profit is maximized, we solve that equation and say, you always tattoo this on your body. If you got it, yeah, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. If you're really into economics and say, man, it's the coolest thing I ever learned, this will get you in any market structure. Now, in perfect competition, again, you price and marginal revenue are going to be the same. Now, society is going to want you to operate over here, but alas, for a monopolist, they're not going to charge this, want to sell this quantity. They're going to want to sell this quantity. That equates marginal cost with marginal revenue. So you equate marginal cost to marginal revenue, and that's going to give you Q star. So here's Q star. So let's find Q star first, okay, class? So what's Q star? Well, here's marginal revenue up here, 70 minus 2Q, and marginal cost is 10 plus Q. So you set those equal, okay? 70 minus 2Q equals 10 plus Q. That makes sense. So I'll bring my Q's to the right. Q, 3Q equals 60. Well, let me bring your numbers to the left. So Q is equal to 20. Okay? Q is 20. That seems reasonable. It's to the left of 35. So you want to sell 20 units. How are you going to incline the market to purchase 20 units from you? You got to charge the appropriate price. Okay? How do you determine the appropriate price? This is Q star. Well, you take that value of Q here, Q20, and you put it in the demand curve up here. So you trace this all the way up. Now what we're doing here is what I read a while ago. just to remind you, these are the 3 steps. That's why we're working this problem today. On page 233, we talked about the 3 steps for determining profit maximizing output, profit maximizing price, and economic profit. That's what this problem wants you to do. So I thought it was a real world. So there's step 1. We found the profit maximizing output. Step 2 now is determine the profit maximizing price by extending that vertical line upward from the output determined in step 1 up to the demand curve. So I need to find this value of P. So here's Q star. What's P star? Well, I find that by putting 20 into the demand curve. Demand is 70 minus Q. Okay? So P star here is the demand function evaluated at Q star, which is 20, which is 50. Okay? Certainly seems reasonable. Price of $50. So come back here. This is $50. Okay? So, this is pretty good what we've done so far. We've been able to find the profit maximizing quantity and price. So that's going to incline the market to purchase 20 units from you. That's what all the demand curve gives you. Okay? All right. They ask some other things here. We may not work through all these, but at least what you'll see in the other ones. Main thing I want to do is find the profit, okay? I want us to be able to find the profit, and then I may post the rest of this solution here, but I want us to know what is the profit here, and so forth. Well, to answer that question, you would have to have something that's missing here. You would have to have that average total cost curve somewhere, right? Maybe it's here, ATC. We can't find the profit yet until you know where the average total cost curve is. But I'm just telling you how you would. If I slapped an average total cost curve on there, then this would be the profit. So maybe, you got some problems there in that I've posted as review exercises over this chapter for the exam coming up. Hopefully you've looked at that, but where they ask you to identify the profit rectangle. But if you knew this value here, what this value is, maybe, if it were $40, I don't know, but if it were $40, maybe make it $45, you say it's $45, that'd be $5 a unit profit over 20 units. It'd be 45 times 20 would be the economic profit. Just saying, okay? All right, so you're going to be asked that down here, like in this question. I'll post some solutions here, but I want you to try these, okay? So you got another problem here. This is the main thing I want you to be able to do for the exam coming up. I want you to be able to do this, okay? I want you to be able to find profit maximizing price and quantity. So here, how many soccer balls does this monopolist produce? At what price are they sold? And then what is the monopolist profit? This is the main thing I'm looking for you to be able to do, okay? Likewise, over here on this problem on the handout, again, this is posted. I want you to give this a whirl. Probably won't just slap the solutions up right away. I want you to try these, okay? And we'll see where you are on Thursday at least. But here they want you, another one, where they give you the demand, total revenue. Now notice total revenue. I want you to notice some relationships here. Demand is here. Total revenue, remember, is price times quantity. So you just multiply each term by Q. That's how you get the total revenue from the demand. Hope that makes sense. Notice marginal revenue. Okay, if you've had calculus, this will make sense. If you haven't, just tune me out for the next 30 seconds. But the marginal revenue is the derivative of the total revenue. Always the case. Mentioned that a while ago. Marginal revenue gives you the slope of the total revenue. So you know how to differentiate a polynomial. If you had an x here, you could find the derivative. So it's 1,000, and you bring the exponent down, and you bump the x. You bring the old exponent down, and you bump it down by 1. That's how you do the derivative, by the way. You go term by term. You take the old exponent. Now here's a 1 here. Okay, it's invisible. But you bring that down from 1 times 1,000, q to the 0 power, okay? And q to the 0, any number to the 0 power is 1. So the derivative of this term is 1,000, or 1,000 q to the 0, same thing. Here it would be, bring this down, negative 10 times 2 is a negative 20, q to the first power. That's how you can find the marginal from the total, every time. If this is a polynomial, that's how you can find the marginal. It's that simple. Marginal cost is given to you here, okay? It's a derivative of the total cost function. But at any rate, I'll be giving you the marginals, okay? So you don't have to use differential calculus because that's not a prerequisite for this course. Okay, I think I exhausted my 30 seconds there, but at any rate, they ask you to find the price and the quantity that maximizes profit. So this is P star, Q star, and then find the price and quantity that would maximize social welfare. Oh, that's different. Social welfare is maximized way over here. Okay, well, where the demand curve intersects the marginal cost curve. This is what we talked about a while ago. Okay, well, we looked at the difference between these 2 points. Okay, and so they'll ask you that, and then so forth. I guess for this test, I won't worry about deadweight loss, but I want you to be able to do these things. I want you to be able to do A and B. I want you to be able to do A here. I want you to be able to do A on this one, which we just did. So you got this handout here, okay? I want you to be able to do these on the exam. They're not difficult. If you can do this, if you can work some of these monopoly problems with numbers in them, that tells me you have some understanding of the theory. All right, so I'm going to leave this for now as it is, and we can come back to this on Thursday as we kind of pull things together for the exam. Any questions on it? Sometimes I feel a bit like an auctioneer. All right, okay. Don't mean to just throw a bunch of stuff at you, but I want to finish this chapter, talk about a few things here. Beginning, okay, on page, we talked about network effects, barriers to entry. I guess I'll have to use my book here, because it's 3 sheets to the wind, or 10 sheets to the wind here. I like to use my loose leaf, but alas, it's not so easy sometimes. I write myself lots of notes in my book. Hope you do too. Last time recall I mentioned there's no monopoly supply curve. There is a marginal cost curve, which doubles as a supply for perfect competition, but not in monopoly. Okay, this marginal cost curve is not a supply curve for the monopolist. Why? Because it does not give you the relationship between price and quantity supplied like it would in perfect competition. Perfect competition, you have a horizontal demand curve, and you go from price over here to marginal cost, go down, that's quantity supplied. It's that simple. No, you don't have price equals marginal cost in monopoly, because you have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve could look like this or this. You could rotate it, you could spin it around this point. If I made it steeper, you'd be shifting this demand curve up. The point here is that you can equate various prices with whatever the monopolist supplier would bring to market. That would depend on the slope of the marginal revenue curve, which could be lots of things. Because if it's steeper, the demand curve's higher, you'd have a higher price. So the marginal cost curve does not give you a relationship between price and quantity supplied. You have to have more information. Okay, so it's not a supply curve. Okay, it's just a marginal cost curve. So your book talks about here no monopoly supply. Okay, hope that makes sense and so forth. We've talked about potential for losses. We've talked about this too, just a little bit. The inefficiencies of pure monopoly relative to pure competition. Okay, that's what we're talking about here in this diagram. Perfect competition will treat this as a market supply curve. Or the individual is looking at this because they have a horizontal demand curve. This is where perfect competition will want to be. But monopolists will be here. So, you've got these 2 arrows here. Okay, so a monopolist charges higher price and less quantity. As a result, price exceeds marginal cost. So there's no allocative efficiencies here. Okay, price is going to be greater than marginal cost for the monopolist. So you remember allocative efficiency. We had that in the previous chapter. That occurs at an output where price equals marginal cost. So you're allocating the right amount of resources, and that keyword's allocate. You're allocating the right amount of resources to producing Nexium, okay? If the price of a pill equals the marginal cost, all right? As far as society goes, they're happy. So they'd be charging a penny for each one of those pills, because that would be the marginal cost. Society would be happy for that, but alas, nobody's going to develop something that they don't really, maximize profit from. So there's an efficiency loss here. The main thing I want you to see is that since price is greater than marginal cost, you got this gap here. There's no allocative efficiency. I hope you understand that. It's no allocative. Now there could be, but you'd be awfully lucky. There could be productive efficiency. Remember? These two things, price equals marginal cost, is allocative efficiency. So here for a monopolist, price is greater than this, marginal cost. But remember, price equals minimum average total cost is called productive efficiency, not allocative, but productive efficiency. It means you're producing things efficiently. It has nothing to do with the resources being allocated in the right way. That's why we call this allocative here. It just says, hey, we're running lean and mean in this industry, okay? Now for a monopolist, this is very unlikely to be true as well, but it doesn't necessarily have to be false, okay? This is true in perfect competition. You got both these things going on. And the only reason it would occur for a monopolist is if I drew in, I don't really want to draw in my book here, but if I drew the average total cost curve right here, where its minimum was right there at that point, okay? Probably not going to happen. One more thing I want to mention, okay, because there's lots of interrelated things here, okay? I hope it keeps you awake at night, so after you say your prayers at night, you can think about microecon till you go to sleep. And it'll put you to sleep, especially if you put Dr. J on recording and you have to listen to me. It puts you to sleep every time. That monotone voice. I mean, you're getting extra for your money in this class, right? Notice something here. Regardless of where the cost curves are here, and consequently where the marginal cost curve is, sometimes we'll draw it as a horizontal line, by the way. The book does that in some of these. But wherever it is, the monopolist is going to charge a price in the upper half portion of the demand curve. That's the elastic portion of the demand curve. Your book makes a big deal out of this. It's important to remember that a monopolist will always charge a price in the elastic region of the demand curve. Not down here, okay? Because then you'd have a negative marginal revenue for these prices down here. So they're going to charge a price at least as high as that which corresponds to the midpoint of the demand curve. So the result is, remember with elastic pricing, if something is priced, you have an elastic good, a price elastic good. If you raise the price of a price elastic good, total revenue is going to go down, okay? So basically what happens if you raise the price, total revenue is going to go down. So if you raise the price, you'll sell fewer units. Total revenue curve goes down. So there's a reason why these two halves are the same color. Okay, and this is where the monopolist, wherever you draw that average total and marginal cost curve, wherever you put it, it's got to be in this region right here. Okay, so I want to mention that. All right, so there's lots of interrelated concepts. This is very conceptual. This is very conceptual material here. I don't know about you, but it's something that attracted me to economics, particularly microeconomics years ago, is because you can, thank you, you can describe these things that we already have, I think, a gut appreciation for. It's like, I like perfect competition. That's got to be good for society. Now you can make a cogent argument for a competitive environment in many cases, perfect competition, or free markets and so forth. Going back to stuff we introduced earlier in the course, by drawing a diagram and putting dollar figures on these areas that correspond to consumer surplus and profits and such. All right, okay, so a couple other things I want to mention here in the time we have remaining. This average total cost curve itself, that U-shaped, in a monopoly, there's reasons why that curve may not be, as low as it could be. All right? I mean, it's going to be U-shaped and so forth, but there's things that go into computing average total cost that may or may not be reflective of productive, efficient behavior. Let me give you an example. A couple things here, but you see this in public utilities a lot. Public utilities are monopolies. They're a lot of times natural monopolies. If you ever go into corporate offices of some of these places, they're really nice. They're posh. Okay? Now we think, oh, what is this? You see oil paintings on paneled walls and all this. I haven't been to the corporate headquarters of OG&E. Used to know someone who eventually, I think, became the CFO of OG&E and so forth. So he did really well from my hometown. But the typical situation, I'll just say, whether it's Oklahoma Gas and Electric, Oklahoma Natural Gas, Texas Gas and Electric, whatever it is, public utilities are kind of known for having posh headquarters. Now, why is that? Well, it's because they're guaranteed a certain rate by the regulatory authorities. So it would be the Corporation Commission here in Oklahoma, which is the rate-setting body for gas and electricity and so forth. That's the rate-setting body called Corporation Commission. Once in a while I get to meet one of these people and I ask them, what's your regulatory philosophy? And they go, huh? But there's a lot to this. But the reason you have this with public utilities is because they can engage in something called cost padding. That is to say, all this cost associated with those oil paintings and so forth, they can somehow insinuate that as part of the cost of doing business, part of the cost of producing a kilowatt hour of electricity. They cover it, okay? And so there's no discipline here. A lot of times there's a lack of discipline. There may be some, but a lack of complete discipline on public utilities to minimize production cost. So to make a kilowatt hour electricity, they'll say it's so many cents, when in fact it could be something less. Okay, because they're factoring in these, oh, you know what, we had to go to this conference in Hawaii, what have you. Okay, you can go all day long with this. It's just kind of, public utilities in particular are infamous for this because they're guaranteed a certain rate by the regulatory authorities. So you have inefficiencies there. It's kind of the opposite of productive efficiency. You have what's called X inefficiency. They'll talk about this on page 237 of your text. Once you read about that, X inefficiencies, this is the production of output. It says here, whatever its level at a higher average total cost, a higher average and total cost than is necessary for producing that level of output. So they're producing electricity, gas, whatever, at a higher cost than what's necessary. It's a form of inefficiency. Another thing is you have so that average total cost curve, that U-shaped curve that's so important to us, that helps us define that rectangle, that green rectangle we were looking at, may not be positioned where it really ought to be to serve society in the best way. It also may not be positioned in the right place or as low as it should be because the monopolist is not taking advantage of economies of scale. Okay, if you have a patent, oh man, I have a patent here or a license, guess what? You don't have to expand your resources to take advantage of economies of scale because you're not threatened by potential entrants. Okay, remember the long run average total cost curve, it's downward sloping for larger and larger plants or firms. And so Walmart took over big box retailing because it's a free market. It's because of competition forced things that way. But if you have a patent or something like that, thank you, you don't have to drive your costs down, your production costs down. Does that make sense? You don't have to slide down that long run average total cost curve. So the lack of, how shall I say this? The lack of discipline, or a lack of potential competition, okay, will not incline firms to take advantage of economies of scale when they should. Okay, it may not incline firms. Okay, we're in perfect competition in a competitive environment. There's a race toward the minimum efficient scale. There's a race toward that, and but there's not necessarily, when you have these artificial barriers to entry like patents, licenses, unique licenses, and so forth. You also have rent-seeking behavior is another thing that factors in the cost, again, of that production, where the ATC is not down where it should be. You have rent-seeking behavior. What's this? Okay, you have cost associated with the kind of behavior that doesn't increase wealth. It doesn't make the pie larger. It just affects how the pie is cut up. Okay, so you would be engaged in what's called rent-seeking behavior if RSU, say our humble, beautiful, wonderful university, but gave every year at this time, they just gave 10 full-ride scholarships to students, and there's 100 students competing for it. You might be in my office telling me, if I had a vote, telling me how wonderful things are going in your class. So there'd be all this activity going on, which really is not making the pie bigger. Okay, there's still, at the end of the day, going to be 10 students get full-ride scholarships. So all this activity is called rent-seeking behavior. And you have that a lot with monopolies. Has nothing to do with the firm's output. They're just expenditures that clearly increase its cost. Their rent-seeking behavior, the book says, is attempts by individuals or firms to use political influence to receive payments in excess of the minimum amount they would normally be willing to accept to provide a particular good or service. So a lot of this lobbying in Washington, D.C. and so forth, and guarantee you that public utilities here in the state of Oklahoma lobby the Corporation Commission. Thank you. Okay. And they're still going to deliver electricity to your house, and guess what? If they do a lot of lobbying, they'll get to charge a higher price. Now, that's good for them, but bad for you as a consumer. Total pie is not bigger necessarily. Okay, so any activity designed to obtain a transfer of income or wealth to a particular form of resource through, say, legislation or exclusive licenses, which exists a lot for monopolies. This is called rent-seeking behavior. That's another cost that's embedded, if you will, in that average total cost curve. I keep doing this. It puts that ATC curve up here instead of down here. Okay. All right. There's two more topics that we'll be talking about next time. One is very dear and near to my heart because my dissertation dealt with an aspect of regulating monopolies. And that was years ago, many years ago, so I've forgotten this. But there's a picture on page 241 of your text, and we just have a little over a minute, so I'm just going to go to this real quick. I want you to study this for next time. And with a natural monopoly, you have a downward sloping average total cost curve. Because it's downward sloping, that means marginal cost is always below average total cost. And so if you want to be here where price equals marginal cost and have allocative efficiency, where society wants you to be, you're pricing it below average total cost. So you'll have negative profits. So that's a dilemma, how to handle that. I know I'd push this in at the end, but I want you to study this diagram here, and we'll talk about this on Thursday. So there's two topics, okay? So she says I have 30 seconds, okay? Just a little less than that. I want you to read about price discrimination, which is something monopolists engage in when they can, say with coupons and so forth, and also regulating monopolies like public utilities. So those are two topics we'll talk about on Thursday, and then we will kind of recap everything and review and then your exam or show off will be later in the week. Okay, y'all have a good day.